Masechet Gittin, Daf Kaf Vav. We begin a new Mishnah that's talking about Lishma and is going to delineate exactly which parts of the get and other documents, other financial documents also, which parts can be written in the standard form and which parts have to be written Lishma for this particular couple. We're used to today downloading a form for a rental form or a sale form, and then we just fill in the blanks of the buyer and the seller and the address. And so that's what we do, and that's okay. But the question is, can you do this according to halacha? So here's once again the standard formulation of a get, and we have two parts of it. The tofes. Tofes is the standard form. That's the one you would download from legalforms.com. It's the same formulation for everyone. That's called tofes. Torif, which is the essence of the particulars of the get, that's going to be the parts that you have to fill in, of the names and the place and the date that are going to be different for every person. We're going to see that those would change except for one line. This line, Hare'at muteret lechol adam, is also an essential part of it. That's the basic statement. You can go and marry anybody else, are also part of the torif. But except for that line, the torif changes from get to get. The tofes is the standard form. And so now the question is, can you write the tofes beforehand, which would be a good thing for the scribe, because then the scribe can prepare many copies of the standard form when he has free time, and then be able to use them and fill in the blanks. So here we go. Hakotev tofse gitin sarich she'aniach mekom ha'ish, mekom ha'isha, mekom hazeman. If a scribe is writing the tofes, the standard part of the get, that's okay, as long as he leaves a space for the name of the man and the name of the woman and the time. So you can write the tofes from before, but the torif you can only write when the husband comes and says, "Scribe, please write a get for me and this wife," and he has to write it then and there on demand. But the tofes he can write beforehand. And the same is true for shtare milveh. Sarich she'aniach mekom hamalveh, mekom haloveh, mekom hamaot, mekom hazeman. A loan document, you have to write you can write the standard formulation from beforehand with nobody in mind, but then you have to leave space for the lender, the borrower, the place, and the time. Shtare mikach sarich she'aniach mekom halokech, mekom hamocher, mekom hamaot, mekom hasadeh, mekom hazman, and sale documents also. You can write the standard formulation before, that's okay, but you have to make sure to leave room for the name of the buyer and the seller, and the amount of money, and the place, the address of the field, or the borders of the field, and the time, the date. Okay, and all this is because of the takana. Well, you can see the Gemara is going to explain that this mipnei takana is actually explaining not simply the last one, but is actually explaining the first opinion here. All right, this is Tanakama. Is not given a name, but the Gemara is going to wonder who is the Tana that says all this. There's two options that we know of. Either it's to be Meir or to be El-Azar. Remember, to be Meir said that the main edim are the ones that are signing on the document. Therefore, the Lishma is actually fulfilled by the signing of the document. So according to the Meir, you don't have to write any of the get lishma. So according to the Meir, actually we have it sounds like you could write even the names in. I mean, why would a scribe do that? Maybe a scribe, he hears some couple fighting in the street, he's like, I think they're gonna get divorced. I'm just gonna write a get on my own, even though they didn't ask me to yet, because I predict that they're gonna come in and ask me next week. So, according to the Meir, it seems like you don't need the writing of the get to be lishma, and so then it's hard to figure out, according to the Meir, why you have to leave even space. Why can't you write the torif? So that's one option. The other, which is we're not sure why, the other option is that to be El-Azar, who says that the main edim are the ones of the delivery edem mesira. According to him, the writing does have to be lishma, but if so, then all of the writing has to be lishma, right? The standard part, the tofes and the toref. And so what the Gemara is going to struggle with is This seems to be an in-between, this Mishnah. On the one hand, you can write the Tofes from before, but the Toref has to be Lishma. Well, which of these two opinions is it? And we'll see both sides that the Gemara will argue. All right, that's Tanakama. Now, Rabbi Yehuda posel bechula. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and says all of them are no good. In all of these cases, you can't write anything. You have to wait till the guy comes, the seller, the husband, and say, I want to write this document, and then he can write the whole document. He can't write the standard formula beforehand. In some of these cases, technically it will be okay, but the Gemara is going to explain this as a gezerah because of get, but get is the main problem here. Rabbi Elazar machshir bechulan chus migiten nashim shene'emar v'chatab lah lishma. Rabbi Elazar, this is the same Rabbi Elazar we've been talking about, Rabbi Elazar ben Shammua, the Tana. He says it's permitted in all of them, meaning he's agreeing with Tanakama that you can write the standard form, but he agrees only in the financial forms, and he disagrees regarding Gittin Hashim. When it comes to Gittin Hashim, the pasuk says v'chatab la lishma, and he understands that to mean the entire get, the tofes and the toref, all have to be written for this particular woman, and therefore he disagrees with the first clause. All right, so a simple reading of the Mishnah sounds like if you said Rabbi Elazar over here at the end, that means the Tanakama is not Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar is arguing on the Tanakama, which would mean that the Tanakama could be Rabbi Meir. But then you'd have to explain why would Rabbi Meir require anything to be, even the Toref to be written Lishma. Okay, so we're going to see, so we can explain, well, some people will explain that. The first explanation of the Gemara will actually say, I'm preempting here because it's going to get a little confusing, there's actually going to say that Tanakama is Rabbi Elazar. I know that's strange, because why would you have a Tanakama? Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and then have Rabbi Elazar again? Yes, in fact, the Gemara will say there's two opinions about what Rabbi Elazar said. They're not exactly the same, but they're both interpretations or traditions from Rabbi Elazar. And so the Tanakama, we could call Rabbi Elazar of the Resha, who says that according to Rabbi Elazar, Tofes you can write beforehand, and the Lishma part is only for the Toref. That's Rabbi Elazar Kama and of the Resha, and Rabbi Elazar of the Sefa is the interpretation of Rabbi Elazar that says no, the Toref and the Tofes all have to be written Lishma. So, right, so there's two opinions within Rabbi Elazar. This is going to be the explanation of Shemuel presently. Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel Sarich sheyaniach af mekom hare at muteret lechol adam. So Shemuel says when it says in the Mishnah that you have to leave room for the names, it's not only the names that change from one person to another, also the basic essential formula, you can go and marry anybody, also has to be written Lishma for this particular woman. All the rest of the standard formulation, that's part of the Tofes and can be written before. Okay, that's one thing Shemuel's teaching us, and then he's going to teach us something else. V'Rabbi Elazar hi damar adem mesira karte u'ba'inan ketiba lishmaha. Our Mishnah, the Tanakama, is none other than Rabbi Elazar, who says that the main witnesses are the ones that are there for the delivery. Because of that, well, the writing says v'chatab la, so the writing can't refer to the signatures, because there are no signatures. You don't need signatures. Therefore, the writing must refer to the writing of the get itself, and that's why, yes, the writing needs to be. According to the Tanakama, who the Rabbi Elazar of the Tanakama, has to be, at least the Toref has to be written Lishma. Okay, so that's how Shemuel is explaining our Mishnah, that there are in fact two versions of Rabbi Elazar in our Mishnah. One that says the Toref only has to be written Lishma, and the Sefa that says the whole thing has to be written Lishma. Okay, good. Now we have to get into a different question. Usricha. This statement, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shemuel, if you have a good memory, you'll know that in the previous Perek, Rav Yehuda in the name of Shemuel also interpreted two previous Mishnayot and said that although they're anonymous, they are the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. And so now we're wondering, why did Shemuel have to teach this so many times? Why couldn't he teach above that the first one was the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and then I could figure out on my own that the next ones and this one is also the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, because it follows logically that he would need it to be written lishma. So we explained we in fact do need to say it in each and every time. Usericha diashminan hachkamaita bahi hu deika leukma kerebi elazar de katani and kotvin vekatani ketavo. So I'm going to go back to the Mishnayot so we can see what we were talking about. The first one that Shemuel said is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar is this: that you're not allowed to write a get on something that's attached to the ground. That's lechatechila, but Avad, if you did write it on something that was attached to the ground and then you pulled it out after, it is kasher. So what's the deal here? You need it to be lishma, or you don't need it to be lishma, because it's on the one end it says you can't write it attached to the ground, and so it means the writing is important. If the writing is important, that sounds like it's to be Elazar. So how come b'di avad it would be okay? And Shemuel said, when it says you wrote it connected to the ground, that's only talking about the tofes. The tofes, b'di avad, if you wrote it while it's connected to the ground, it's okay. As long as you plucked it off and then wrote the toref afterwards, lishma, right? So it's essential that the toref has to be written lishma. And so he explained that this clause is in fact to be Elazar, and it was referring to the writing of the tofes only. But if he only said this case, I would say maybe Shemuel would only apply that to that case, because you have this problem in the Mishnah that seems to contradict itself. It says you can't write it, and it says you can write it, and the only way to explain that, it would be to say it would be Elazar who requires it lechatechila, but b'diavad requires the whole thing to be written lishma lechatechila, but b'diavad it's okay if you only wrote the toref lishma. That's fine. Aval sefa de katani she'en kiyum haget ela bechotmav ema Rabbi Meir hi damad ide hatima karte. So if I only had that case, right, that makes sense. But the next case I would have said doesn't sound like it to be Elazar. The second case that he said it about was this here, that everyone can write a get, even haresh shoteh vekatan. And then it says, Haisha, a woman can write her own get, and then give it to the man, and he will then give it back to her, and explains why, she'en kiyum haget ela bechotmav, because the main thing is the signing. And so it doesn't matter who had it written, even if the woman has it written, or if the man has his receipt written, but then they give it to the other party, who effectuate it, and then give it back, that's fine, because it's the signatures, right? In other words, when the man takes it from the woman, so what, the woman wrote it, he will take it, he will have it signed, and the signatures are the main thing. So since it says that sounds like it to be Meir, and so I would assume that the whole thing must be to be Meir, and so that's why Shemuel has to come and say, even in this case, that line Ela b'chotamav is only explaining this last part of it, but the part before Charesh Shoteh Katan, that is to be Elazar. And what do you mean? How could they write it if they don't have da'at? They're talking about the tofes. The Cheresh Shoteh Katan only wrote the tofes, but the toref has to be written lishma by a competent adult. And so he needed to say that because you wouldn't have thought so otherwise, since it has this bechotmav line. Okay, so that's why Shemuel needs to say it in case 1 and case 2. Vi ashme'inan be'ahi Hahi nami ika leukma kerebi Elazar, aval ha'ema midesefa Rabbi Elazar have resha lav Rabbi Elazar sericha. If I only had in those two cases, I would say, yes, I can interpret those two cases as it being Rabbi Elazar. But in this case, our Mishnah that we just read, I would say no, because the Sefa says Rabbi Elazar. So obviously, if the Sefa is Rabbi Elazar, he's disagreeing with the Tanakama. So the Tanakama is not Rabbi Elazar, must be Rabbi Meir. And that's why Shemuel has to go out of his way to repeat again. Even this Mishnah I know it's not a simple, easy reading, a straightforward reading, but that's exactly his point. Even this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. All right, very good. Now, mipnei takana, we're going to see a few different explanations of this takana. This is essential, right? If you understand what the takana is, then you'll understand who is the author of this Mishnah. The takana is the takana being more lenient or being more stringent? If you say the Mishnah, the Tanakama is Rabbi Meir, who doesn't require lishma at all, then the takana would explain why the rabbis came and said, even though you don't have to write a lishma, we instituted that you should write the Torah lishma, right? And that would be Rabbi Meir that would be Rabbi Meir. On the other hand, if it's Rabbi Elazar, then the Rabbi Elazar would say, essentially, I think that the whole thing should be written lishma, and the takana would come to override and say that the sages said, listen, even though really the whole thing should be written lishma, here's why we'll be lenient and say the tofes you could write beforehand. So is the takana coming to be lenient? That would be if the Tanakama is Rabbi Elazar, or is the Tanakama adding a stringency that some of it has to be lishma? That's how we would explain if the Tanakama is Rabbi Meir. All right, so we'll see about 4 different explanations of this. Here's the first one. Continuing with Shemuel, my takana amar Rabbi Yonatan mipnei takanat sofer v'Rabbi Elazar he. So this here Rabbi Yonatan agrees also, as Shemuel said, that this is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. And in fact, really, according to Rabbi Elazar, the whole thing should be written. The tofes also should be written lishma. But we want to help out the sofrim. Da'amar edem mesira karte. Ubedinhu de'afilu tofes namid lo lichtov. Umishum takanat sofrim sharu rabbanan. It is Rabbi Elazar, and it's the edem mesira. They're the ones that are important. There's no one signing it. Since there's no one signing it, the whole thing, even the tofes, has to be written lishma, and so cannot be written beforehand. However, in order to help out the Sofrim, the rabbis made a special leniency, right? The Sofrim, it was very hard for them because, right, people come in all day long and says, oh, I need a get. And he's in the middle of writing. It takes a long time if you have to write the whole thing. And someone else comes in and they're backed up. And it's not good for them to be backed up because then people won't get their services on time. And the husband will, decide, forget about it. So the Sofrim are overworked. So we want to give a chance for the Sofrim to, on their, when they have time, at night, they can write up many forms, standard forms, and then their job will be much easier. So that's that's the takana that the rabbis made on behalf of the Sofrim. Good. Rabbi Yehuda posel bechulan. Now we're going to go to the next clause of Rabbi Yehuda and explain what his opinion is, right? Still following the same a line of thought. Why would it be Yehuda say all of them are no good? Gazar tofes atu toref, gazar shtarot atu gittin. He's making a double gezerah, which usually we don't like to make double gezerot, but we're going to say it's all one gezerah. That regarding the get, he made a gezerah that the tofes, the tofes would be okay to write it on its own, but the problem is if you start writing, if people are allowed to write the standard form, the tofes, beforehand, they're going to come to write the toref also. The scribe, he's making standard forms, and he's like, you know what? I saw those people fighting. Let me put those names in also, even though they didn't ask me to. So once you start writing, you're not going to want to leave blanks. You're going to, so he's like, oh, I know I'm going to get at least 10 Gittin tomorrow. Let me put the date in, even from before. So he's making a gezerah regarding Gittin that you can't write the tofes because then you may come to write the toref also, which would be really bad. And he further makes a gezerah that you can't write the standard form of other documents, financial documents, loans or sales, because if you do it for other documents, then you're going to do the same thing for Gittin. The same sofer, he's writing different documents all day, and he's not going to remember to distinguish, oh, this is a get, I can't write the form. This is the thing, I can write the form. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda makes an across-the-board ban on all. You can't write any part of any document beforehand, so that we make sure that the real problem will be writing the toref beforehand. Okay, so that is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Elazar, machshir bechulan chutz migitei nashim. Now, back to Rabbi Elazar. Now this is Rabbi Elazar the second, right? The Sefer, who says that the other documents are fine, but get nashim, you cannot write any part of it. So he says, Tofes atu toref gazar. So he agrees partially with Rabbi Yehuda that we should make a gezerah, and since the toref would be really bad if you wrote it not lishma, so we're going to make a gezerah, because if we allow you to write the Tofes, Shelo Lishma, people will come to write the Toref, Shelo Lishma, for a get. So therefore, for a get, he says you can't write anything before. However, this Rabbi Elazar says, Shtarot atu Gittin lo gazar. There's no need to make a gezerah of other financial documents to Gittin. People can distinguish. Okay, this is a sale document, this is a get. Sale documents, I can write the Tofes before, get, I cannot write anything before. And so that's easy to distinguish. There's no need to make a gezerah. Okay, Shene'emar vechatab la. Now we're quoting the last part of the Mishnah, right? I'll just remind ourselves, the last part of Mishnah actually quoted, according to the Rabbi Elazar, you can't write any part of it. Why? Because it says vechatav la lishma. It has to be written for her sake. So let's elaborate on that. Wait a second. Since it says la, doesn't the word la mean for her, meaning the particulars of her name? And that would mean that really just the toref has to be written lishma, the part that pertains to her in particular, but the standard form could be written not for her, right? And so you can interpret v'chatab la in that way, and that would accord actually with Rabbi Elazar, the Tanakh of the Resha. So we say no. Ela ema mishum shene'emar v'chatab la lishma. No, we're going to put emphasis not on the word la, but rather on the word v'chatab, the writing, and that means all of the writing, the tofes and the toref, everything has to be written lishma. Okay, it's hard to really distinguish between this statement v'chatab la, which is lishma, and v'chatab la lishma is just emphasizing one word or another. Rashi says is an important distinction between shene'emar and mishum shene'emar. Shene'emar is more direct, mishum shene'emar is a less direct proof. Okay, but anyway, from here it sounds like it's a deoraita obligation that you have to write the whole thing, lishma, which would mean that this takana, if we're talking about the takana for sofrim, is the rabbis are really going out of their way to help the sofrim, because even though this is based on a pasuk, or somewhat based on a pasuk, that the whole thing should be written lishma, nevertheless, to help the sofrim, they said, you know what, all right, write the standard form, because otherwise the sofrim cannot keep up with the demand. All right, now back to something that we really had needed to clarify before. Kashya de Rabbi Elazar, ad Rabbi Elazar. Shemuel, how could you say Tanakh Amaz is Rabbi Elazar when Rabbi Elazar disagrees with him at the bottom? And the answer is Tere Tanae v'alibad Rabbi Elazar. In fact, there are two Tanaim meaning the memorizers. There's two traditions of the memorizers, but both based on Rabbi Elazar. Right? Rabbi Elazar said something, and then there's two traditions interpreting what he said, which makes sense because essentially Rabbi Elazar gave the basic statement that has to be written lishma, but then exactly which part has to be written lishma, there's two interpretations about what he said, and both are included in the Mishnah, one anonymously, one Rabbi Elazar, but they're really both within the school of Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Shabtai Amar Chizkiya Mishum Ketata v'Rabbi Meir hi Tamar Edeh Chatima Karte. And now a totally different opinion. We saw Shemuel, who says that this is Rabbi Elazar, but Rabbi Shabtai, in the name of Chizkiah, says, no, this Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says it's the signatures that are the main witnesses, and therefore they have to be written lishma, the signatures, but none of the get has to be written lishma, so really, you could write the toref and the toref, the tofes and the toref, beforehand. However, the takanat chachamim is because of ketata, because it will lead to fighting. What kind of fighting? Ubedin hu dafilu toref nami lichtov v'zimnin deshamale lesofer deka kativ v'sebarah ihu ka'amar le v'avala ketata behadeh. Here's the situation. Really, according to be Meir, even the toref he can write before, right? And this scribe, again, the standard case, the scribe, he hears this couple fighting, yelling at each other. He's like, I know, I could see the writing on the wall. I've seen this before. They're going to get divorced tomorrow. So let me save time. And he goes the day before, he writes the whole get with their names and everything. And so he writes it, and now she might hear about this. Says, hey, I was in the shop of the scribe. I saw that someone will tell the wife, I saw he wrote a get with your name on it. And she'll hear that. She will think that Ihu Kamarle. She will think that the husband asked him to write a get, and then she'll come home and said, I can't believe you already instructed the scribe to write a get against me. You didn't even tell me. I know we were fighting, whatever before, right? But you went and you're planning on giving me a get, and that'll make her really angry, and then it will be out of control. And it will actually cause a divorce, right? So, because he's writing a divorce, it will actually, if she hears about it and misinterprets and doesn't know that the scribe wrote it himself, it will actually make her even more angry, and that will be a huge problem. So therefore, Rabbi Meir says, that's the takana, right? So Rabbi Shabtai says that the Tanakama is actually Rabbi Meir, but even Rabbi Meir says, listen, if you want to write the standard form, fine. You can write anything, Shalol Lishma, but don't put people's names in it before they ask you to, right? Because then you're just asking for trouble. Okay, Rav Chista Amar Avimi Mishum Takanat Agunot. Now, a third opinion is that it's not because of Ketata, but because of Agunot, because of either deserted or divorced wives. That's all he said. Now we're going to have two interpretations within this. Amri la Rabbi Meir, Amri la Rabbi Elazar. It can be interpreted that he means agunot. You can have a problem of agunot either with Rabbi Meir, or if you say the Tanakama is Rabbi Elazar. So we'll explain both ways. Amri la Rabbi Meir, Damar adeh hatima kateu b'din hu tafilu toref name lichtov. So let's assume the Tanakama is Rabbi Meir, who says that the signatures have to be written lishma, but the entire document, even the Toref, does not have to be written lishma, so you could write the whole thing really from the letter of the law beforehand. Here's the problem. By allowing the whole document to be written beforehand, but by the scribe, even before anyone asked him to, it makes it too easy, too readily available for the man to have a get, to give her a get. As follows: the guy, the scribe, he has like his standard forms. Sometimes when you go in and you buy keychains or mugs, it has everyone's name on it, right, from A to Z, everyone's name. So the scribe, he's writing Gittin for everybody he knows, just in case they need one. And so now what will happen is the husband, he may get angry for some reason, whatever. People get angry for various reasons. And then he's so angry, he'll be like, hey, give me that get. It's already written. He doesn't even have to do anything. And he'll take it, he'll throw it at her. And then she will be not aguna in the sense of that she can't remarry. She'll be divorced. But the thing is that she'll be, it means aguna in the sense of alone, deserted. And it'll be for no good reason. Therefore, see, we make a takana that we have to have a cooling off period. And so the scribe, you can write the form, but we want the husband to have to go through the trouble to go find the scribe, track him down, write the name. How do you write the name? What's your father's name? How do you spell that? Right? And go through a situation. By the time he does that, it's going to take an hour or two, maybe more. And then, he'll calm down and says, listen, I got angry about that thing, but you know what? Okay, forget it. So it's not a good idea to have a get ready with names on it beforehand, because then you might use it. It's like having a loaded gun ready wherever you are, and you might get angry and use it and then say, oh, you know what? I should have taken a few minutes before using it. And so that's the explanation according to the Rabbi Meir. Amar la Amri la Rabbi Elazar. But some say that this explanation that it will cause aguna is actually assuming that Tanakama is Rabbi Elazar. Amar ade misira karte ubedin hu de afilu tofes nami la lichtov vezimnin doed mezal medinat hayam velashkach safra veshabik la veazel umeagen umotiv la. In fact, Tanakama is Rabbi Elazar, who says that the ede misira are the main ones, and therefore the lishma writing has to be the writing of the entire thing, the tofes and the torif too. The problem is that sometimes the husband is going to go, he's moving to a different country, and last minute he says, okay, we're getting a divorce and I'm out of here. And so he'd be willing to give her a get, but he doesn't want to wait around. He doesn't want to miss his boat, and he's going to look, okay, I'll divorce you right now, but I'm leaving in an hour. Bring the sofer. Where's the sofer? Okay, the sofer is not home. We can't find the sofer. By the time the sofer comes, okay, wait a second, I have to write the whole thing. He's going to leave her, and this is the standard definition of aguna. He's going to leave her really in aguna because he's going to be away and can't be found, and she will not be able to marry anyone. And therefore, it's better to have the scribe have standard forms already there in his office, and that way, if you need, and last minute, someone's going away, he's just here for an hour, but he's willing to give a get, okay, get the scribe, sit down, just write in the names, write in the date and the place, and give it, and it'll take just a few minutes, so we want to make it easier. So essentially, this is very interesting because it's really about the right balance. As we said earlier in the Masechet, that there's some religions and places where divorce on demand, it makes it too easy. You just say 3 times, get out, and then that's it, they're divorced. But that's not good to make it too easy, because people are hot-headed, and then they'll treat their wives unreasonably, make it too easy. On the other hand, you don't want to make it too hard. There's some religions that also do that and say, no, you can never divorce, or make it very, very difficult. That's also no good, because people will be stuck. And so we want to find the right balance in between, so that there should be some waiting period, some cooling off period, but also not make it too difficult. But that's the essential machloket between these various interpretations of our Mishnah. Now we're going to focus on the part of the Mishnah that says you have to leave a place for the date. So the names, his name, her name, the place, those are definitely standard. The date, we already spoke about whether, and if so, why you need to have a date on the get. So that's what we're going to get into. Kapasik vetane, lashen amina nisuin, velashen amina erusin. So first we note that the Mishnah seems to make it a blanket statement that you always have to put a date in the get, and makes no distinction between whether the get is after they did nisuin or after they only did kiddushin. Even if a couple did only kiddushin, which in the olden days used to be many months apart, now we do it just a few minutes apart. But let's say they do kiddushin, you do the ring, and then she changes her mind before you do nisuin, you still need a get in order for her to go and marry anybody else. So this makes no distinction, and you would need a date in the get, whether they were getting divorced after being fully married or only kiddushin married. So bishlam amina nisuin, I understand if they're having a get after being fully married, nisuin, then certainly you'd need a get for either one of 2 reasons. Ben leman damar mishum bat achoto ika, ben leman damar mishum pere ika. Let's remind ourselves of the 2 reasons. One is because bat achoto, if a man marries his niece, just for example, and she is unfaithful. Now, he may be upset that she's being unfaithful. Nevertheless, since it's his niece, he also wants to protect the family honor. And so he may cover up her sin by writing her a get and writing the date before she sinned. And that way, either if it goes to court, the court will say, oh, you were divorced when you were with the other guy, so then no death penalty. Or even if there's no court case, just for public opinion, then he could say, look, no, she was divorced when she was with that other guy, and that way save her reputation. And so that's why you have to write a date in the get, the proper date, so we know really when this divorce happened. Now that would be applicable both for nisuin and for kiddushin, because if someone does kiddushin and she is unfaithful, also capital punishment. And so for the same reason, if someone was married to his niece or anyone who he cares about, independently of being married to, may want to cover up. And so you'd certainly need a date in the get, no matter what, according to that reason. However, there's another reason that says mishum pereh, because of produce. Now, produce it belongs, if she brings land into the marriage, then the produce during the time of the marriage, from nisuin and on, belongs to the husband, and from the time of the get, it reverts back to the wife. So we need to have a proper date in the get so that we know exactly until that date the fruit fruit, the produce is his, and from that date on, the produce is hers. Oh, so that makes sense why you need a proper date. And that would make sense if it's a get after Nisu'in, if they were already fully married, then the produce transferred. Ela mina erusin, but if they were only did Kiddushin, and now he's giving her a get, according to the reason of covering up her sin, that would equally apply if they only had kiddushin that he may want to cover up, and so we have to have a date. But according to the reasoning that we have to make sure to know who the produce belongs to, and arusa, before they're fully married, when they just do kiddushin, she still gets her produce. The husband doesn't have a right to the produce just yet. And so if they are getting divorced before the nisu'in, he never got the produce, and therefore there will be no need to write a date in the get. So that's the question. How come the Mishnah doesn't distinguish and say, oh, make sure to write a date in the tofes of the get if it's for nisu'in. But if they only did kiddushin, then you know what? You don't have to write a date. That's the question. Amar of Amram, ha milta de shamait mine de ola de amar mishum takanat valad velayadana mainihu. Says, I heard something that answers this question from Ula, and he said that's because of a takana regarding the child. But I didn't understand what he was talking about. I didn't understand how caring about some child would help answer this question of why you'd have to put a date in the get, even for kiddushin, according to the opinion that says you have to put a date for produce. However, but then one day I heard the following braita, and then I put it all together, and now I understand it. Haomer kitvu get la rusati lich Nesenna agadeshena eno get v'amad ula matam gezera shema yomru gita kodem libna hachaname gezera shema yomru gita kodem libna. The Baraita is talking about a case where they did kiddushin, right? Some time ago they did kiddushin, and now before the wedding, before the nisuin, before the wedding night, the husband, the groom, goes to the scribe and says, write a get for my arusa. I'm not going to use it now. I don't want to break off the engagement. I'm going to use it after the wedding. First we're going to get married, and then. Why would he do that? I don't know. Maybe he has a change of heart. He doesn't really want to get married anymore. But the wedding's all planned. They're serving lamb chops and sushi, and so he wants to go ahead with the wedding. Have a nice time at the wedding, and then he's going to have this get afterwards. He'll wait, maybe even wait a few days after the Sheva Barachot, and after all those nice fun meals, then he's going to give her a get because he really wants out. If he does that, the get is invalid. Now, why is it invalid? Because gezerah, that people will say that the get came before the child. In other words, let's say she actually gets pregnant after the wedding night. She gets pregnant and has a child some 9 months later. So people later on will look at the date of the get, because the date of the get is the date when it's written, which is before they were married. And even though it was given after they were married, so in reality, this child is perfectly legitimate because they had the child and then they were divorced after. But people won't know that, and will only know the date on the get, and will say, hey, you were divorced from some days before your wedding, and now this child was conceived after your wedding. This child was conceived out of wedlock. Now, that doesn't make the child a mamzer just for being out of wedlock, and so the child has no legal halachic problems about marriage restrictions or anything. Nevertheless, it's still a stain. It's still a bad reputation for the child. And so we have a gezerah that might happen. Therefore, that's why the law is eno get. You cannot do that. You cannot pre-write a get before when you only did kiddushin, because you may have a child beforehand, a child afterwards. So that reasoning applies here also. Here also, should she have a child, then people will say, wait, when did she have a child? Oh, it was beforehand. And it was, she had a get. Look, the get is before she has a child, and therefore, if you're writing a get for kiddushin, right, at the time that they only have kiddushin, that would be no good because it may come to cast a stain on the child, and that's how that's the reason why our Mishnah doesn't make a distinction. You have to write a date, whether it's after nisuin or even if it's while they're mikudeshet, because it can lead to this kind of confusion. Amar Bi Zera, Amar Bi Abba, Amar Shela, Amar Rav Hamnuna Saba, Amar Rav Ada Bar Ahava, Amar Rav. A long lineage in the name of Rav. Very often when you have a long lineage of like that, it's coming to emphasize that this is a really important statement. Halacha K'Rabbi Elazar, we follow Rabbi Elazar, who requires that the get should be written lishma. Kari Rav Ale de Rabbi Elazar, Tobina de Chakime Rav. Who said this? Rav has said halachas Rabbi Elazar. He used to say about Rabbi Elazar that he is the greatest of the sages, Tov, right? The most gratified of the sages. That the halacha follows him, right? I mean, people have different opinions, but when your opinion is accepted, right, then that's wonderful, and it shows one's glory. Okay, now we ask, is this true regarding this halacha? Is this true regarding other shtarot? Okay, we know for a get it has to be written lishma. But how about the other ones? Now, this is regarding we're assuming, either to be Elazar from the Tanakama, or to be Elazar, the last one. They both agreed that for other documents, you can write the tofes. According to Bimir, certainly you could, right? So this actually would be according to anyone. So now we're just asking this. You said this is a halacha, but that would mean that the names have to be written lishma for other documents, but the standard form for other documents, it's okay to write them. Now, is that true? That for a loan document, for a sale document, you can write the standard form beforehand? Hi asharta de dayane. De mechikatba mekamed lishade sahade achatimat yadaihu pesula alma mechze keshikra hachana me mechze keshikra. So Papi said in the name of Rava that these are authorizations of judges, right? People bring in all kinds of different documents to the judge. To the judges, and the judges will analyze and certify that this document is legitimate, and they write a letter of certification. Right? That's asharta de dayane, is a letter of certification. Now, the proper procedure would be that someone brings in a document, and the judges would analyze the signatures, call in witnesses, and after they ascertain that it's good, then they should write the document. However, there are some judges who do it the other way around. I guess they assume, I know this is probably going to be good. So even before they go through the process, they already write a document that certifies this is good. They hold it, they keep it themselves, and then they call in the witnesses and they certify it, and afterwards they say, okay, here's the letter. We wrote it already. So Rava said that judges who do that is no good. That letter of certification is not good. Why? Because it looks like falsehood, right? He's right. He wrote it before it even happened. So it looks like it looks like a lie. How could you know if, especially if it's a different date? He wrote it yesterday. These signatures are good, but he only went through the process of certifying it on the next day. So even though it is true and he did go through the certification, nevertheless, it appears as falsehood. This would be like, when your parents have to sign your test and you get 100 and you told your mom that you got 100, but then she forgot to sign it, and so you forge your signature. But really, she would have signed it. No, it's no good. You still can't do that because it's still lying, even though, you're not deceiving anyone, and it is in fact true that, she knew about it, and so on. Okay, and so then we could apply the same thing here. This was about the judge's certification, but we could say the same thing regarding any of these documents, a loan document, and if he's writing it beforehand, this person borrowed this much money from that person in this place. Now, it didn't happen yet, and you already wrote it, even though, yes, it will happen later. The scribe already knows, I can see this happening. I see this guy's looking around for a loan of $1,000, and he can predict that what's going to happen. Nevertheless, it appears as a falsehood because it's written before it actually happens. Okay, veleta mid Rav Nachman. Now, okay, so our answer is no. We don't have to worry about Rava because we follow the halacha of Rabbi Elazar. In fact, Rabbi Meir would agree with it that you can write the standard format. Only Rabbi Yehuda would disagree. You can write the standard format of the financial documents beforehand, and we don't worry about this looking like it's a lie because of what Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman, Omer haya Rabbi Meir, afilu meso b'ashpa chatamo untano la kasher. Rabbi Meir said you can take a get out of the garbage. Right? It was already pre-written. Some guy wrote it for his wife. Take it out of the garbage. Oh, that's my name too. I'll use it, and that's fine. And he has no problem that it looks like a lie. La peliga led Rabbi Meir, ela begiten hashim, debeinen kitiba lishma, aval bishashtarot la. And even the other sages who argue against Rabbi Meir, like Rabbi Elazar, they only argue regarding giten hashim because a get nashim has to be lishma. So they said, no, you can't do that for a get nashim and pull it out of the garbage. But if it's a loan document and they pull it out of the garbage and say, oh, Reuven is borrowing $100 from Shimon, that's my name too. I'm going to use it. So that will be no problem, and we don't say there's a problem that it looks like it's lying. שטר שלווה בו ופרעו אינו חוזר ולווה בו שכבר נמחל שעבודו תעמד נמחל שעבודו אבל משום שקרה לחיישינן. And a further proof that you can pre-write a document or reuse a document is, as Rabbi Yochanan says, that if you have a loan document and now it's paid off, you cannot use it again. Why? So look at the reason. The reason why you can't use it again is because the lien on it has been forgiven. If we make a loan on the first of Nisan, and so when you make a loan and you do it in writing, that means the borrower's fields will be mortgaged for the loan from the date on it. So let's say at the end of the month, it's forgiven. Okay, good. Now, a year later, you find the same document and you want to reuse it. And it has the same people, same names, same amount. The date is wrong, but okay, I want to use it again. So this is a problem because there is no more lien on that land. And now if you reuse it, right, this is a problem because you may recollect from that land. Let's say the land was sold and then go get it back. So that would be a problem. That's why for a loan document, even though you can write the loan document beforehand, but you could even write the details of a loan document beforehand, but not the date. The date of a loan document has to be written the correct date because of this. Anyway, the point is that you can the reason why you can't reuse a loan document is only because the lien has already been forgiven, and the second time around it will have it will look like a false lien. So the problem is that the lien was already forgiven. But the reason that you cannot reuse it is not because it's a lie, because it looks like appearance of falsehood, because it looks like this was about the second loan, even though really it was written about the first loan. We don't care about that. And so therefore, if it's another type of document where the date doesn't matter, or there is no lien and there would be no effect of reusing it, it's totally fine to reuse a financial document. A get is different because the get, we're following the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, and has to be written lishma. But for the other documents, in fact, you can have a pre-written sale document, and that would be perfectly fine. And that is that's the final conclusion of the Gemara. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.